Northwest Now is supported, in part, by viewers like you. Thank you.
Tacoma may still fly under the radar nationally, but here in Western Washington, a strong argument can be made that it's the place to be. Tacoma's new mayor is Anders Ibsen, who says he believes in his hometown and intends to spend the next 4 years building a long-term strategy for the city and making the city's bureaucracy more responsive. Tacoma Mayor Anders Ibsen is our guest next on Northwest Now. Tacoma is run day-to-day by a city manager hired by City Council. The idea is to leverage the expertise of a full-time, nuts-and-bolts administrative talent to better run a highly complex bureaucracy like city government. But nobody elects the city manager, and increased accountability has been one of the continuing arguments in favor of a strong mayor form of government. But that idea was most recently rejected in the 2024 vote on amendments to the city's charter. So Tacoma has a mayor who kind of runs things, with authority over department heads and staff, and at City Council serves as the chair with the ability to veto ordinances and break ties. With that said, the office comes with a bully pulpit that can be used to set the agenda and articulate priorities. Anders Ibsen is 40 years old and served 8 years on Tacoma City Council. Ibsen was born in Tacoma, attended the Tacoma School of the Arts and the Evergreen State College. By day, Ibsen is a realtor and a property appraiser. Mayor Ibsen, that sounds good to you, I'm sure, after winning an election. You're just turned 40 and you're the city's 40th mayor. That's kind of a neat sequence of numbers there. Congratulations on your win. And I want to start a little bit with Civics in Tacoma 101. Mm-hmm. This town has a city manager. What exactly, the mayor has some powers, he does not have some powers in this city. Talk a little bit about what your scope is as mayor.
Well, first off, really glad to be here. It's been several years, I think, since we last spoke on the TV, so thank you for having me back. And yes, so starting with your question, Tacoma's form of government is a weird hybrid, I'd characterize it as. So on paper, we are a city manager form of government, which means that I, as the mayor, am one of 9 voting members of the city council, and we collectively hire, supervise, and evaluate the city manager on an annual basis, and usually the contract comes up every 2 years. In practice, unlike most city manager systems, like our neighboring suburban cities, for instance, like think Faircrest or University Place, the mayor is not just a council member who gets nominated as mayor by their peers. That's right. The norm in most cases. You actually run for mayor, as you might recall from last year. Yep. And so in practice, what this means is that as a full-time member of the council, because in theory, the law considers members of the council part-time, but they're really not. They're all over the place doing
a lot of studying to do, yeah.
Oh, for sure, and travel and committees, and good luck being employable with a lot of employers. So you have to be really flexible or have some other thing going on. But the mayor is considered full-time. So that means is besides a number of more commitments in terms of sitting on different boards and committees and commissions, traveling, representing the city in those respects. In practice, I have a lot of direct connections and more frequent communications with executive level staff.
I say department heads is your bailiwick.
Department heads, the city manager, and we just talk a lot more. And effectively what that means is I work a lot more on kind of the boring back-end processes. And those boring back-end processes, when you're talking about results, when you're talking about outcomes that your average person cares about, like how our police department functions or how we're going to track infrastructure funding or tree canopy or things like that, a lot of it is just based on the day-to-day work of departments and how we all work together. And that's not something I directly control because I'm not a strong mayor, but it's something that we all talk about, and it informs the work of the council and the scope of how we discuss things.
You also have a bully pulpit, though, as well. I mean, mayor comes with a certain amount to set the priorities, set the agenda, to be maybe the first among equals. Is that fair?
It's more about how I see it is you're setting the first draft, and that's really no different than any other conventional like strong mayor system or like the governor relating to the legislature, for example. I mean, the governor proposes a budget, and then the House Appropriations Committee says that's cute, here's ours, right? But in practice, yes, you do get a chance of making the first draft. in practice, the first draft is usually the strongest if you consult with lots of people prior to putting it together, and then people have something to work with, and then the end product may or may not resemble it, but at least you have a good start.
You mentioned the city manager, Hyun Kim, appointed to the position that he'd held as an interim for 8 months. Talk a little bit about him and your relationship there and your hopes going forward.
Oh yeah, he's a really bright guy. He's got a great level of experience directly with the city of Tacoma and also prior with the city of Fife, alongside other cities in the western United States. And we're currently in the process of getting through not just the contract process, but also his work plan. And that's actually been a really exciting little jaunt, is marrying the city council's priorities with what the day-to-day execution of that is going to look like as the city manager carries it out. And as this is a budget year, how we're going to pay for those things too.
Perfect segue. Yeah. One of the things you got handed, hey, congratulations, you're mayor, and oh, by the way, here's a structural deficit.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that, how you're approaching that, what some of the early thinking is. Bring me up to speed.
Well, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it's not really my first rodeo. When I first got on the city council at the ripe old age of 25 back in 2012, I also came in with, I think, a $12 or $14 million shortfall then too. And the structural deficit, that's its own TV series. We could have its own segment
I know
about that. But
yeah.
In sum, it's really an all of the above approach, because we're dealt a really bad hand because of the backwards, unfair, unstable nature of the state's tax code. And on top of that, we have just an older city. We have aging infrastructure. We have costs that are structurally rising higher than our revenues. And so the best we can do, besides advocating for a better landscape with the state tax code, is making sure that we're getting the best grasp of the scope, like what should we really be doing, but what should we be doing with the greatest focus, and how we get our best handle on control and cost, and maximizing not just revenue in the sense of different tax options, but revenue in the sense of growing the pie. So economic development is very much the long-term win with budgeting.
Little introspection here. You mentioned the fact you were 25 when you first got into office at City Council. I've been following you on social media for a long time.
Bless you.
Watching your interviews on other platforms and things. And I want to ask you, how over those years, now that you're 40, you've got a kid, you're in business, you've been earning a living out there. How has your style changed a little bit? And how does that impact the office? Talk a little bit about your growth, if you perceive any.
Sure. Well, the main difference between being a 20-something and especially a 40-something with other obligations like parenting,
right.
relationships, ownership, those types of things, I'd say one of the biggest things that I'm really trying to focus on is less. And not even just with my own personal life and how I manage my own office, but also just the approach I'm bringing to city strategizing and the budgeting is subtracting rather than adding. What that means is it better to really own a few things and do them quite well, or to be really mediocre with 30 things? And the inclination of a 20-something is to do all the things. It's to do everything because, one, your energy kind of allows you to do it, but for two, your life experience as you just live a little and life knocks you around a little and you pick up things, you really develop your niche, is you learn that there's greater power with focus. There's greater power with really drilling down and not neglecting or necessarily throwing away the other 80%, but really owning that 20% and growing outward from there. So you really gain an appreciation of synergy, you gain an appreciation of specialization and delegation, and what really demands my own personal attention versus what I can delegate, what I can delay, or just what doesn't actually have to happen.
Trans that a little into personal style, because I hear it ringing through in terms of your growth process. I remember when you were younger, you were pretty combative at times. Now, that's not a criticism. You had a belief, you were young, you hadn't been through a lot of the ringers, boom, boom, boom. Do you feel like you've broadened your views a little bit? You're a little more, and I don't mean this negatively either, political, a little more savvy in terms of dealing with people and personalities. Talk a little bit about that, because I'm hearing it when you're talking about it.
Sure. Well, combative is really in the eye of the beholder, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
very much so.
Sure. I mean, I've always made no bones about it that I'm a very direct communicator, and sometimes that can be challenging in the Pacific Northwest, where the worst epithet you can say is no, right? Or I don't want to, right? Or just a polite contradiction, right?
Yeah.
So what I think might have changed, besides the fact that it's just a different civic landscape, it's a different culture, people have different expectations, is that there's definitely a way to have a greater focus on what the end result is, right? And I think one of the things that's really changed, and more than just myself, is my observation about the city government itself is that we didn't even have support staff, for example, back in the early 20-teens, for example. And so if you wanted to do something, you had to beg, borrow, and steal, basically. You had to have a friend who knows a friend in the bureaucracy. And so being an actual serious policymaker with a focus on doing things was in some ways foreign. In some ways that could be perceived as really pushing the envelope, wanting to do things, versus it was more like in the early aughts, 20-teens, more akin to like a nonprofit board where there's a collective agenda and you kind of confirm it, versus now it's more akin to a legislature where individual members of the council have their own priorities and have more of the conventional give and take. So I think that there's absolutely an aspect of learning. There's also a concurrent growth in the organization itself and the expectations people have.
Yeah, I think you make a nice transition there too. And I think a very admirable goal that you've laid out is really not having to know the guy who knows the guy to get stuff done, but to really have a customer service focused mentality
for sure.
in all the departments. And if you talk to, and I have for a lot of years, business owners here, builders, developers, all the usual suspects, they will tell you that that customer service mentality it would be great to have it.
And it begins and ends with predictability. So if it's all based on, and relationships will always be important, of course, but if your ability to do something is entirely based on just knowing the right person to call or talk to, then good on you, but bad on the other 90% of people who are trying to just get that permit taken care of, for example, right? Versus if there are very clear understandings about how things work and that there's an actual metric of success for that department based on it, which is actually something that we're working on with the city manager in this current iteration, then it's not just about you and your connections, it's about everyone doing better.
Which takes me right into, you're doing a great job on my notes, measurable results.
Yes.
Also, here's my observation on measurable results over time. Sounds great. It was the big thing when Boeing came out with lean processes and the state government was going to have a dashboard for everything. Local and city governments were going to measure all results. Grantors and funders all want measurable results. Turns out it's really hard. And the numbers don't always augur in your direction, so we're just going to kind of take the measurable results and sweep them away. I think we're on the downside of the measurable results rhetoric bubble. I think you're going to have to stage a little bit of a comeback to get measurable results, I think, back into the civic dialogue.
We literally are right now.
Yeah, how do you do that, and what do you want to measure?
Well, that's literally what we're doing right now with the upcoming city manager plan and the upcoming city manager evaluation process. And I'd like to see this as part of the budget as well. So the acronym that everyone is banning about these days is called KPI, Key Performance Indicators.
Yep.
And something that we're going to do that's, I don't think ever been done in my experience, is we're integrating those into the city manager work plan and into future evaluations with the direct feedback of the city manager. So instead of us from on high saying arbitrary things, right? Like create X amount of jobs or solve homelessness, cure cancer, give everyone a puppy, those types of things, is having thoughtful discussions with the people actually carrying out the work, namely the executive staff and also the frontline staff, and having the most informed indicator about what success really looks like. So you're actually listening to the people really doing it instead of just imposing something that's arbitrary or something that's purely politicized. And
that they have some agreement on too.
Yeah.
There's buy-in.
And just have a give and take, right. And crucially, and this is what I think separates thoughtful metric-based conversations versus just all over the place and then shelve it away later, is you need to have very few of them. So you can't have 30 indicators of success. You can't have 40 priorities. You have to have 3 or 4 or 5, right?
That really hinge on results.
Right, and they have to be, ideally, they have to be tangible. So your average Joe or Jane in the community has to see them or be able to know when things are going right. They can't just be manufactured. And there has to be a manageable number of them. They have to have timelines associated with them, and they have to have buy-in and actually be informed from real practice, as demonstrated by the police officers or permit officials or arborists or whoever's doing the work.
Well, from your lips to God's ears on that one, I hope, I wish you success on that.
Thank you.
It sounds great. And I want to talk to you a little bit about your top priorities. We'll hit public safety, responsiveness, homelessness, and economic opportunity. So we'll kind of knock through these. Yep. Public safety, officer shortage, your reaction to Patty Jackson, and lots of turmoil in the department over the course of the past couple of years. Mm-hmm. Can you get your arms around that, or is there some fixing to do? It seems like Patty might be a step toward that. Talk a little bit about that.
Oh, several steps. She's been very well received by the officer rank and file, by community members. It was a very good vote on our part, I think. And I'm super grateful for her having led the way to get us almost there when it comes to full staffing at that 380 and change level of officers.
Okay, I didn't know we're getting close.
We're getting very close, yeah,
okay.
through a lateral hire program. And that's not the fixed number, of course. I mean, staffing needs to be forefront among other safety indicators because people need to feel safe. People need to actually have a functioning traffic division, for example, which, by the way, you're actually going to find by a recent city press release, that there is a new DUI emphasis traffic division that we just recently got a grant for. So that's actually going to, it's just started as of a day or two ago. And so that's something that we're going to be trying to look at is what are more conspicuous ways that we can serve you and keep you safe through our public safety agencies and also by supportive programs and also other agencies like getting more tree canopy in areas that need it, for example, making sure that we're not neglecting sidewalks in the south end, for example, because all of these things feed into perceptions of safety and people's ability to feel like the city cares and that their neighborhood is a place that they can feel comfortable in.
Here's the big 800-pound gorilla in the room when it comes to any discussion about civic government these days, and that is homelessness. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about the unified regional approach. You know, the King County Housing Authority is kind of blowing up. I'm not sure that it's been effective at all, but there is another regional idea. Talk a little bit who's in that, where's that coming from, and what your hopes for the future are with it.
Sure. I think one of the key differences between Pierce County's regionalized approach, Tacoma, Pierce's, and our surrounding cities and up north, is we're not trying to bite off more than we can chew at first. The goal is to actually build the muscles of collaboration with attainable wins and then grow from there. So the URA, Unified Regional Approach, has been ongoing for about a year now, and our friends at the county have been stalwart partners. That has not always been the case, so we're really grateful for Executive Mello, for the County Council, and for all the work they're doing. Tacoma, of course, has been at the forefront of these, and we're also really grateful for cities like University Place, for Fife, for Lakewood, for others that have actually been at the table with us, among others, Puyallup. And it's about measurable benchmarks that are something that helps all of our systems by making things more efficient now versus just throwing more money at the problem and having more inefficiency. And so where that begins and ends with is data. So one of the big three that our goal is for this year in 2026 is requiring that there is a shared data set for our shelters, for our service providers, for our field people who help the unhoused, making sure that there's a real point in time, a real-time focus.
An accurate picture of what's going on.
Precisely, so that we're not double counting, we're not duplicating, we're not forcing people in a traumatic situation to relive their experiences again and again and again when there's staff turnover. So making sure that there's a really tight, real-time shared data system for everyone. That's the first part. The second part is making sure that there's a plan for inclement weather so that when there are cyclone feeling rainstorms or probably what we're going to see is heat domes again in the summer, for example, that there's a real plan for not just Tacoma, not just 3 zip codes in Tacoma, but a real regionalized approach all throughout Tacoma Pierce for people in the communities in which they're already living, having a place they can go to stay cool, to get the support they need, get a temporary place to crash and not be on the streets. Because at the end of the day, whether we're talking about good data systems or funding efficiencies, really what the average person cares about is fewer people on the streets. And that's how the city is going to measure success. And it's also just as much about prevention and affordability and expanding housing options, just as much as it is about cleaning up the problem after the fact.
The good news is that you're a realtor. You've been out there pounding the streets for a while. You understand, and an appraiser, what it takes to want to make an investment in low-income housing, how you have to be able to cover your nut, and how renters, need to be able to pay their rents and do those things, and how difficult it is to make those investments when you, as the small-time landlord or the developer, have to look at the bottom line.
Oh, for sure.
I'm a little hopeless on that in some ways because of the economics that you are now very familiar with too, here some 15 years later.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about that. Dissuade me from my hopelessness.
Sure. But as a small-time landlord myself too, you can add to the LinkedIn profile, I guess.
Okay.
But so your question, just if I'm understanding you correctly, is about the state of the rental market, or just being able to provide for more housing options, or
Just providing more housing options for lower income people that pencil out.
Right. Right. So one of the bigger challenges there is that we're not just simply talking about construction, and that's one of the bigger strengths that Tacoma has led the state and the region on, is what's called middle housing. So instead of just building these vast new apartment complexes and these massive townhouse developments and so forth, which we certainly need more of, it's also about that mother-in-law cottage in your backyard. It's also about having a townhouse here, a townhouse there, a duplex on the corner, more options that are mid-level, not quite larger scale, and that also blend a little bit more gracefully into single-family neighborhoods. And so we've allowed that,
Yes.
and we have had it on the books now for almost a couple of years.
Yep.
Now it's time to do some code cleanup, because I've heard a lot of feedback from our building community about greater efficiencies and greater time.
Getting it done
Yeah.
is hard.
Yeah.
A lot of friction.
Yeah, greater
Yep.
just improvement of the ease of building with the city when it comes to permitting and licensing and so forth. And so that's not lost on me. That's not lost on my city council colleagues as well. And so that's definitely something we can do, because it's really not all things being equal. It's
Yeah.
not just housing in the aggregate. If I were to really list the biggest priorities, it would be starter homes.
Yeah.
When it comes to owner-occupied housing, because that's where the biggest level of competition is. And I mean, try with today's interest rates, thanks to the Iran war, thanks to tariffs, thanks to everything, and now jumping up at 6.5%. I mean,
Yeah.
that's an over $3,000 a month mortgage payment for your starter home in Tacoma.
Right. Hard to make that low income or affordable to get it to pencil out for the builder and the developer. And you mentioned multifamily. We've had a couple of big multifamily projects blow up in downtown Tacoma.
Yeah.
And downtown Tacoma is kind of going through a little bit of a phase. It's come so far. I mean, I
Sure.
make no bones about it. I talk about it on this program all the time.
Yeah.
How far the city, but we're in a little bit of a flat spot in downtown. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, downtown is anything but flat. That's actually one of the issues geographically.
Right.
So if we're diagnosing the general downtown issues,
Yeah.
right, which that's, again, it's just like structural deficits. That's its own TV show.
Yeah.
One of the challenges historically with downtown, one is it's too big, and that's actually one of the bigger pieces of feedback from our regional bodies, like the Puget Sound Regional Council, is that it's really too big to have much focus. It's very disparate. It's very car-oriented, so even if you live in one of these newer mid-rise apartment buildings that comes up, if you have to go shopping for groceries, if you want to take your sweetie out for a date, what do? Do you walk? Do you take the tram? Or do you drive to Proctor Stadium, Seattle, what have you? And so it's a larger conversation about infrastructure and land use and livability. So I think one of the biggest things that we can do in the short to medium term for downtown is, yes, absolutely focusing on getting as much growth as we can. Yes, taking a look at supporting the Downtown Tacoma Partnership and looking at crime and blight and quality of life. But it's really about setting up neighborhoods to win by how they're aligned, like actually how the infrastructure makes a certain area feel walkable. So think how the streets are set up, protected bike lanes, street trees, and just making sure that over that long play, downtown can actually feel and act like a real downtown.
A little aside here, turns out Sound Transit and ST3 are facing a huge shortfall on funds. Are you ready to go sword fight and get light rail down to Tacoma Dome at least?
Well, it's not even sword fighting. It's just about being smart, right? I mean, sword fighting is usually how you lose these, right? People don't want to hear from bloviating politicians. They want to hear solutions. And thankfully, we're very well represented on Sound Transit by our Tacoma delegation, but also Pierce in general. We all have a shared interest. And something that gives me a lot of pride in Tacoma is that as a county, Pierce County, we historically have a proud tradition of showing up in force in Olympia, in the legislature, for example, when it comes to asking for infrastructure, when it comes for Highway 167, when it comes for the Port of Tacoma, what have you. And Sound Transit's no different. We have a strong regional coalition, and so I, along with my colleagues, am going to continue not just fighting, but also just making the soundest business sense, because this isn't even just about parochial Tacoma interest. Everyone is better off along the I-5 spine if there's a Tacoma connection. It just makes fiscal sense and prudent economic sense for everyone, not just Tacoma.
Agree, and I'm glad you're more optimistic than I am, once again. So
Well,
that's a good thing.
What's the saying? Pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will.
There you go.
It's not about being Pollyanna, it's about being strategic.
In our last 60 seconds here, how can people get involved with the city of Tacoma? How can they interface with you? Is there an opportunity for that? Where can they go? What do you suggest?
Sure, there's no shortage of things to do, so it really depends on your interest. If you're just curious about where do I start, I'm so overwhelmed, you're always welcome. You can just talk to me. You know, I'm pretty good at checking my emails. You can literally just email me at mayor@tacoma.gov. See, easy. I also host regular coffees in the district. You can check out, in the districts, plural. You can check out city social media. I usually host them Wednesdays in the morning or afternoon, and I rotate the neighborhoods, so you're welcome to stop by and talk about whatever comes to mind or ask questions and whatnot. And if there's something more detailed, then it really just depends. And there are a number of wonderful community organizations, both in direct partnership with the city and also grassroots volunteer that are constantly doing the work. And it takes a village to make a city great. And I'm very confident in where Tacoma is going to go.
Yeah.
Our list of challenges is immense, but the opportunities are even greater.
Yeah, and I think with what's happening in Seattle, maybe there might be some opportunity here for Tacoma. And again, I'm heartened by your optimism. Anders, thanks so much for coming to Northwest Now.
Always a pleasure.
Tacoma sure has come a long way since I started getting a little familiar with the South Sound as a student at PLU back in the early 80s. The bottom line, and I've said this many times before on this program, I think Tacoma is one of the real gems of not just the Pacific Northwest, but the entire West Coast. My thanks to Anders Ibsen as a returning guest to Northwest Now. I wish him and all of you Northwest Now viewers in the City of Destiny the best of luck. I hope this program got you thinking and talking. You can find this program on the web at kbtc.org, stream it through the PBS app, or listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That's going to do it for this edition of Northwest Now. Until next time, I'm Tom Layson. Thanks for watching.